So let's move on then to this week's question of the week. So this week's question of the week came in Frequent Miler Insiders from Susan. And it was a great question because it reminded me of the first time I attended an FTU. And it wasn't directly related, but it reminded me of the time I sat at a presentation. Remember, it was Ben from 1 Mile at a Time talking. And he asked the question, how many people, I've talked about it before probably, how many people here primarily redeem their miles and points for premium cabin travel? And almost every hand in the room went up. And I was like, what am I doing wrong? Because at the time I was thinking, I just want to fly as far and often as I can. Economy class, the front end of the plane gets there at the same time as the back end of the plane. I'll take economy, except that obviously I've since learned that there's some value in premium cabin travel. And Susan has obviously realized that also, but it reminds me of that time when I knew less about the difference, because Susan asked, we found a great deal on a cruise leaving from Rome. I'm looking for airfare from Detroit to Rome in September. I have a certain number of points, some Delta miles, some Amex points, some Chase points. We've never flown first class. What airline do you recommend? And what's the best strategy to get a deal on first class? And so she asked that. So for first class to Europe, Greg, you're based out of Detroit, so you're a perfect person to ask this question. She's got some Amex points. She's got some Chase points. She's got just not that many Delta miles, but some Delta miles. What's the best option for first class out of Detroit?
Yeah. Well, if you value nonstop flights, then hands down, what you want is to see if you could find award availability on the nonstop Delta flight to Rome from Detroit, because you could book that with Virgin Atlantic miles for only 50,000 points each way. And you can transfer your Amex points or your Chase points to Virgin Atlantic to do that. So that's an easy one.
Great redemption. But is that first class, Greg?
It's what she's thinking of as first class. So right. Yeah. So
I agree.
International flights usually distinguish between first class and business class. So this would technically be business class. More and more, especially flights to Europe from the US, that's the most you're going to find on the plane anyway. There are some flights that have true first class where you're going to get even more luxury. The beds are even flatter.
The champagne is a little sweeter, and
right. I mean, you're talking about getting caviar instead of whatever you're getting in business class and in first class. But if you want to go that route, then I think your best bet. Oh boy, maybe to do Lufthansa first class, but there's just a lot of complexities to that because you're not going to be able to book that until about 2 weeks prior to departure, and so that's a really tough one to do.
No, I totally agree. My first thought was, do you really want first class? And it's easy to get caught up when you're like, oh, all these people are flying first class. And if you haven't flown, and I could tell from the way the question was asked and then the subsequent answers that Susan just probably hasn't flown international business class before. And so she was just thinking, I want to sit at the front of the plane, and not realizing that the first class is very limited. So if you want to fly to Europe, you're talking about Lufthansa flies a first class cabin, Emirates flies a first class cabin to Europe on just a couple of routes from New York. And then it's like Singapore on a couple of routes. One route, I think, JFK to Frankfurt has first class. Swiss does, but you can't use miles for that. Air France does, but you can't use miles for that unless you got elite status and blah. There's a whole bunch of different things there. So basically, first class to Europe is more or less just not even really a thing. I mean, if you can book Lufthansa 2 weeks out, great, but otherwise, it's not really much of a thing.
On almost all those cases, it's really inconvenient flying from Detroit because now you're talking about at least 2 stops. And so, so the one exception is if you could get Lufthansa occasionally flies first class out of Detroit. They don't always. So, if all the stars align, you could get there in 1 stop. But too much trouble. I start with business class anyway because you don't want to get overspoiled for business, which is really good by itself. So
it is. International business class and is typically really, really good. So when somebody suggested to Susan, do you really want first class or is business class okay? And she said, well, I don't know. Is business class like the first class? And so it is. I mean, when you're talking international, like Greg said, business class is often the highest that there is on a plane, and it's usually international business class is usually lie flat seats. There are some exceptions there, but for the most part, lie flat seats. So out of Detroit, your best options are probably, like you said, Delta using Virgin Atlantic points. Are there any other options that come to your mind to get to Rome from Detroit? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, I mean, you could do Lufthansa business class. You could do Air France. That would be a stop in Paris.
So what would you use to book those? Lufthansa business class?
Lufthansa business class.
You got Amex and Chase points.
You would use your Avianca Life miles probably, although yeah,
probably, yeah.
Unless you also have United miles sitting around, then you might want to do that, but that will cost a lot more. And with Air France, I mean, I think you would still use Virgin Atlantic. Well, you would look at the price through Virgin Atlantic or through Air France, and you could transfer to either one of those and book it that way.
And the nice thing with both of those options, by the way, is that Lufthansa, Star Alliance carrier, you can book through Life Miles, and Life Miles is a transfer partner for Amex, but not for Chase. They are also transfer partners for Citi and Capital One if you have any of those points. Air France is transfer partners with both Amex and Citi, and so is Virgin Atlantic, partners with both Amex. I'm sorry, rather Amex and Chase is what I meant to say.
Right.
So both Air France and Virgin Atlantic partner with both the programs where Susan has points. So those would be good options to look at, because then she can combine the power of all the points together to book those flights. So there you go. International business class, really good. Probably going to be your only option in a lot of cases, and certainly a good option. So that's what you want to look for.
Yep.
All right.
All right.
I think that brings us to the end then. I want to thank everybody for being out there with us this week. If you've enjoyed today's conversation, you'd like to get our posts in your inbox, you want to go to frequentmiler.com/subscribe. Again, that's frequentmiler.com/subscribe to get on our email list. You can follow us on Twitter and Facebook and join our Facebook group, The Frequent Miler Insiders. Wherever you're listening to this show, make sure you subscribe, enable notifications, give us a thumbs up, leave us a comment or a little bit of feedback. Let us know how you're enjoying the show. We appreciate you guys being out here, and we will see you again soon.
Bye, everybody.